I use the word migration less, and it's more around data and file management and optimization.
TutorLead is a remote-first company based out of Canada.
What makes a world-class Microsoft 365 intranet and digital workplace?
One of the reasons most customers are still in that enablement category and they haven't been able to move on is because they're still in the middle of big migrations, right? They're still modernizing to the cloud, right? And so let's be honest, right? That's a big challenge. So the trick that I found here is that there's a technical migration, right? If we take like SharePoint migration as an example, there's a technical migration where you're migrating content, solutions, you're doing foundational restructuring. Foundational restructuring is things like flattening the structure, right? Doing things that kind of cloudify, right? The approach that ready it for teams, right? Things like that. So there's things that we do there, and that's like the technical migration success. You could take a file share migration, you could take a variety of other types of migration scenarios, and they have a very similar model. Maybe solutions is a little bit less important, but they have this sort of technical excellence where we need to migrate it successfully. And then there's sort of this other thing that we often do in migration projects, which is we want to optimize, garbage in, garbage out. So we want to make sure, we clean up data, we remove stuff, et cetera. And the problem here is that so many organizations tether these two projects together, right? So it becomes a migration and optimization project when those are two very different projects. And this is very important, the optimization project is way more successful in the cloud than it is on legacy technology for a variety of reasons. Like a really simple analogy, let's say I have a library that's an old library, it doesn't have any new digital tools, et cetera, that exists. And then I have this super futuristic, even cooler library than we have today. And if I have these two libraries and I'm essentially trying to organize content here, I have to manually go through and comb through piles of books. It's not even structured, right? It's like even worse. In the new library, let's imagine every single thing that's in that library, it's fully indexed, right? It's opened up, it's read by machines, it's understood, it's organized in multiple ways. Every time you walk in that library anywhere, like every activity you do is logged. So we can actually see like what are the most popular book areas, what's the travel pattern or journey that users go through, like all that data richness is there, which again, we have view counts. We don't have that in file shares as an example. We have that in the cloud. So these kinds of data points, and the list goes on, but the examples here of having this really powerful, technology rich environment enables us to be faster and more efficient at that optimization and certainly more cost effective. So it makes sense. I think more and more organizations need to stop trying to optimize where they are and shift all that energy towards optimizing in the cloud and just get the data as quickly as possible into the cloud. Because once it's in there, you have so many other tools and ways in which you can pattern and optimize it. And the costs are so minor, right? Like the shift to the cloud is relatively trivial for storage costs and things like that as well. So those are my quick comments there.
Richard, I think one of I take total blame on the ISVs that have the migration software. And we've said for years that just because there was so much work in the migration part of that, migrations which are more project centric, time sensitive, like we're shutting down, we're closing down the licenses for these servers. Let's move them over here. We're no longer going to use Slack or Box. We want to pay for these other third-party solutions. Let's move it all over. And so, but as part of that, we've always said, look, don't just lift and shift, meaning don't just move the data over, use that as an opportunity to clean up. And we'd always use the analogy, like you're moving your home. You don't just open up a bunch of boxes and randomly in the room that you're in, shove everything in there. No, you thoughtfully go through and pack up. Dishes are all together, clean dishes, not out of the sink, clothes from the bedroom. But as you're doing that, you're like, hey, and I don't need these sweaters anymore. I'm moving to Miami, or I don't need this dish set, seating for 24. And so you reduce that. And so, which sounds kind of counterintuitive to what you just said, meaning get it all over there and then.
But it doesn't work that way, right? Because if you take that analogy, what we have in this new world is we have tools that automatically to determine which dishes are dirty and can separate them for you, right? With queries and other techniques. Like it's just a different, I know this physical analogy starts to break down, but that's why I was using the library one. Cause at least, new libraries are pretty cool in how they do that. Like you have a computer kiosk in the library, right? I can look up, I don't have to go and walk around the library. I can just look up a document, book, same idea. I think, there's too much of this where, and it's true, like years ago, I would be on the same boat. Like we would always say, clean up before you move, right? I don't think that's true anymore because the technology, first, migrating is pretty straightforward, right? Like if we're talking about file shares, especially, right? The volume of data takes a physical time to transfer, but generally speaking, it's within reasonable timeframes, and you can migrate. And you have large data storage for free, and then even the data storage in the cloud is quite cheap. And the problem is every time we've been in those projects to clean up, the problems people run into is, oh, I don't want to delete it because someone might be viewing it. And in a file share, you don't have, there's no way to prove that someone's not viewed that for 2 years, 3 years, but in the cloud we can, right? So I don't know. I just think that, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I agree. I agree with the change. Cool. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is that was the old way of looking at that. I mean, the reality is that you're doing there's obvious cleanup, the things that you don't want to lift and move over there, but otherwise you're exactly right. And the other thing is that the optimization, it's not a one time. This is an ongoing activity. Think about it. I mean, how many times is when I was a SharePoint admin where I'd be like, okay, we're done. And then somebody'd be like, oh, except we're reorganizing. The business units are merging together. This is an 1,800 person organization. And they'd shift and move things around. It was like, okay, we had, SharePoint we had to move and other file shares and other third-party data in. And so it was this constant process out there. That is just the reality. So yeah, that's why I use the word migration less, and it's more around data and file management and optimization. And so that is going to be constant because the business is going to change. Your user requirements are going to change. There will be reorgs. There's going to be mergers and acquisitions. There's all these different things. We are constantly going and reshuffling and reapplying. And I think over the next decade, one of the stories that we won't kind of below the water level there is that all of this data that storage is just so cheap, so we saved everything, and it will be refining and picking those things out and cleaning out a lot of that stuff. And that's not an overnight. It's not a time-based. That's just part of that ongoing optimization.
Yeah, I love that. It is definitely an ongoing process, right? It's, optimization might be in many projects, but they never really end. Yeah, very good call out.